Hello, we're the Cryptid Code. We're your hosts, Harmon,
Kenzie.
and we like to talk about cryptids, aliens, and generally anything spooky.
And we cuss a lot.
Indeed. And welcome back, everyone. I hope you all are doing well. Kenzie, it has been a while.
It has been a while.
What have you been up to? How staying safe from cryptids out there?
Oh, of course, all the time. Don't you know? I keep that cryptid spray on me at all times.
Got that motherfucking thing on me.
No, did I tell you I got myself a cryptid car sticker? And it says, "Are those sentient pants?" And it's like those night crawlers, and it's a goofy drawing of two of them. It's amazing.
Aw.
You're the one who showed me them, so it made sense.
Well, I actually got little season 3 gifts for everyone. I didn't get a chance to give them to you, but I wanted to send a picture in the Discord, so just give me a moment.
Yeah. Well, don't feel bad, Harmon, because you still don't have your Christmas or your birthday present. They are currently sitting in my living room. And it is, what month is it?
Was
It's
it?
April. It's April. It's April, and you still don't have your Christmas present.
It's fine. I still need to give Jake his Christmas present too, but it's been
okay.
rough, man.
We're just behind.
Schedules are hard. But give me a second. I'm dropping a pic of what I got you and Jake to honor. Okay, I just sent it to you on Facebook. Check your DMs.
Oh, what the heck, man? I got Discord up. Hold the phone here. I'm going. Harmon, sent a photo.
It's Sheep Squatch
I
in
love
honor
it.
of our first cryptid.
Our first cryptid. Oh, I love it so much. Oh, Harmon, thank you.
Of course, we need to recover him at some point because I keep finding new info.
Oh God, new info on the sheep squatch, the lame cryptid that we made fun of for like the whole episode.
And going back to early Cryptid Code, I was like, ooh, Harmon's editing. Left something to be desired.
Oh, come on. The early episodes, chef's kiss. They're the OG beautiful. You can't doubt them. They're amazing.
They have a certain, I don't know, homemade quality to them.
Exactly. And it makes them even better.
But it's good to have you back.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Yeah. So are you ready to crack in?
Oh, heck yeah. What do you got for me today?
For our next case, we are tackling a classic creature of the night. One that I'm actually surprised it took us 3 seasons to get to.
Ooh.
It's a staple of horror cinema and has haunted movie theaters in various forms since 1922. But instead of the silver screen, we'll find it instead in the small city of Mineral Point, Wisconsin.
Okay, not gonna lie. Never heard of Mineral Point.
Oh, it's very small. It has less than 3,000 people.
Okay, so doesn't make me feel bad about my geography. Good.
You know where Wisconsin is, right?
Yes, I do know where that is.
Okay, that makes one of us. Kidding. I keep getting it mixed up with Michigan, which I know is probably just pissed off like 20% of our Wisconsin listeners.
They're like, we are most certainly not Michigan. Well, that's like, I went to Florida once and I was getting like alcohol. So they had to see my ID and I showed it to them. And the guys behind the counter are like, what is this? And I was like, what do you mean? They're like, is this a state? And I was like, yeah, I live in it. They're like, are you sure it's not just Virginia? Like, do you live west of Virginia? I'm like, no, I live in West Virginia. It is a place. It is literally right above Virginia, but I promise it is a state.
West by God, motherfucker.
Literally, it exists. Don't insult West Virginia, damn it.
I swear to God, I'll play Country Roads right here in the store.
Right now.
The date was March 14th, 1981. Police officer John Pepper was pulling up to the Graceland Cemetery. Neighbors had been calling in, reporting a strange man lurking around the graves. The lights of his squad car paint the gray, lifeless stones in flashing shades of red and blue. But they only reached so far. The officer pulled out his flashlight before descending into the necropolis. He weaved through the maze of mausoleums, scanning the shadows. That was until he caught sight of a figure among the tombstones. When Officer Pepper asked what they were doing, the figure bolted away. Even as John gave chase, the lurker got away by bounding over a 4-foot fence in a single bound and escaping into a nearby pasture. Now, this sounds like a bizarre but so far mundane crime, right?
Kinda. I will say real quick, I feel bad for police officers that get called on these types of calls because they're like, one, you got a caller being like, I don't know what I saw, but it was really weird. And like, someone was doing something really shady. I think it was a person. And you hear something like that and you're like, oh shit. Then you go and make the call. You get there and you're probably already stressed because you don't know what you're going to be walking into. Poor man. No, thank you.
It gets weirder.
Oh God. But real quick, are they assuming that this guy is like a grave robber initially? Is that why they're like, dude, you can't be here?
They probably just thought he was a weirdo. It's the 80s. People are on like drugs and stuff.
Like trespassing, all that stuff. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Or like goth just became a thing in the 80s.
Oh, so you got all the gothic kids going to cemeteries and you got all the Christian people holding their pearls like, oh no.
It didn't get up to the fever pitch of the 90s, but
that's good.
when the goth epidemic really reached its peak.
The epidemic.
Yeah, luckily now we have herd immunity against goths, and now they're just an average, regular part of society. But this encounter takes a turn for the spooky with Pepper's description of the figure. The officer described them as, quote, a huge person wearing a black cape and a white painted face, about 6'5" and ugly, end quote. Just put this bitch on blast. I love it.
God. And ugly. I wonder what the face looked like that made him be like, this is the only way I can explain it.
Imagine committing a crime and you're reading about it the next day and the police officer goes like, 3 out of 10.
I would be insulted. I'd be like, well, God, I hope you don't come to the next place I rob. I don't want to be insulted.
But this is the first encounter with a fearsome creature that stalks the city of Mineral Point.
That poor officer.
The Dracula of America's Dairyland. The Nosferatu of the Badger State. The Mineral Point Vampire.
Oh my God, we have never done vampires. This is exciting.
I guess you can argue Snillygash, but Gassed?
Snallygaster.
Snillygaster. What the fuck did I say?
So the Snallygast.
Snillygaster. But that's more of like a dragon, octopus, whatever the thing.
With fangs. And it didn't it only killed one person, I think. And that wasn't even an official death. So, and the sucking of the blood thing only occurred once with that.
The
so
big slurp.
Yeah, so I'm going to say it doesn't really count as a vampire. So I'm going to say officially this is most certainly the first vampire.
First traditional vampire. Very traditional, because remember, it's wearing a cape. I love that.
Well, I'm picturing this vigilante guy with a white cape and white makeup on his face. And he's like, oh, I am a vampire, Dracula. That's so funny.
Blah, blah. You'll never take me alive.
Blah, blah, blah. Harbin. You'd make an awesome vampire for Halloween.
I went as one once. I just imagine the Muppet, the Count from Sesame Street,
yes,
being like, "Hey, cab, before running away."
I like that idea.
But yeah, we're finally covering vampires, and I'm surprised it took us this long, especially given we've covered their long-standing rivals, werewolves, on several occasions.
That's true.
And I take it you're familiar with vampires. They're pretty universal.
They are indeed. I do. I do get it. I really do. I do. I like vampires. I've always liked vampires. They're always cool.
Yeah, did you hear that the Twilight series is getting like a TV show?
What? No,
Yeah, they're making a TV show out of the Twilight books.
you're lying to me. That is a
No,
lie.
no, it got announced like 2 days ago.
I
I hope, I
no.
hope, I hope they annex, XA the part with one of them being a confirmed Confederate soldier, because that always made things a little awkward.
Good old Jasper. And he was a proud Confederate soldier.
He
And
still talked like fucking Foghorn Leghorn.
he lied about his age so he could join sooner. Like he was underage when he joined. Listen, I know all about Twilight. I follow so many Twilight accounts. I cannot believe. No, they're only making a TV show about Twilight because they saw that Harry Potter is getting a TV show reboot too. And I will say they're gonna fuck up on both counts. I know it. I can feel it in my bones.
They're like, we can make a TV show out of our problematic writer too.
Yeah, literally.
Stephanie Meyer chose to make a Confederate soldier who not only didn't regret the Civil War,
Yeah, never had commentary about it. Didn't say it. And he
but,
never like said like, yeah, I regret the war. No, never once. Never once did he say that.
but lied about his age, mean he was excited to fight for slavery.
Oh, but let's not forget
I'm sorry,
too.
states' rights.
Yes, but let's not forget. Stephanie Meyer's books also are big on imprinting on children, newborns, fresh children. And then they're like, well, they feel the same way, but when they're children, to them it's like a familial relationship. And then when they hit a certain age is when it changes to like love and sex and all that. And I'm like,
that's
this is grooming.
Yeah.
And the
that
tribe she used in her books is a real tribe, and she misrepresented them so poorly. And like, there's just so much about it. There's just so much.
We're gonna move on, but I just want to add one last thing about Twilight. Being a 25-year-old man, never expected to have fucking strong opinions on Twilight, but I love that flashback scene to when the vampires and the wolf tribe first meet, and it's like the 1910s.
Yeah.
And the Native Americans are still in fucking furs.
Like, they did such a horrible. They did not do well with these movies, but like they're just, those movies are a cult classic at this point. It like, you can't get rid of the OG movies like this. This is a crime. We can move on now. I'm sorry. I'm done.
I want Steve Buscemi to play the leader of the Vatican vampires. That's all I'm gonna say.
The Volturi.
Now, speaking of Dracula, I love that this vampire has almost the archetypical clothes of a vampire. It's the 80s, and this dude is still running around in a cape.
Literally.
It's like the official uniform of vampires. I love it.
Apparently, you do see them with capes quite often.
Now, as you can imagine, news of something like this spreads very quickly in a small town like Mineral Point. For the next 2 days, the whole town was caught up in what was called vampire fever, where a number of pranksters around town would dress in similar garb and generally act like jackasses. You also have to consider that this period of vampire fever was also including April 1st, April Fool's Day.
Oh boy.
The incident even found its way into headlines, such as with the Wisconsin State Journal, which published an article headlined, "Vampires Stalk Mineral Point." To quote the article itself, quote, Last night we had a half a dozen vampires on the loose in town, Trot said, who I assume is the sheriff. They never specify who Trot is.
Oh,
We received several phone calls and were stopped by people on the street reporting encounters with white-faced, creepy-looking people jumping out of the shadows at them. End quote.
dang.
It's me. I'm white-faced, creepy-looking people.
Well, honestly, that's the problem with like the news line sometimes. I feel like all they do is make more hysteria. Because they always do the taglines. They're like, what can we freak people out with the most as a headline? And it reminds me of do you remember like a bunch of years ago when those like clowns were a thing?
Yes.
Like hiding in the woods, like trespassing on people's properties and like being weird. Like that's what this makes me think of. Like people heard the word vampire and they were like, oh yeah, let's freak people the fuck out.
It was Wisconsin's first contact with the goth community. That's it. They didn't know how to handle it.
They're like, oh God, what do we do? Jesus Christ.
I saw a man in mascara.
Boo-hoo.
They're just fucking filming The Crow and they just couldn't handle it.
Oh my God, it is literally the Crow. He just needs a cape. And then, yeah. The white makeup, that's on point.
But to Officer Pepper, this was no joke. According to Ranker.com's account of the encounter, the officer actually returned to Graceland Cemetery the next day and found a trail of footprints in the snow where he had seen the figure running. What made it so unsettling, though, is that the footprints stopped at the fence where the stranger jumped, but the snow on the other side was completely undisturbed. The figure had seemed to have vanished.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Poor Officer Pepper. Oh my God, this poor man.
If this was like a movie, I feel like Officer Pepper would be like the protagonist, like the one cop who knows what's going on.
Yeah, who and like everybody else is like making fun of him or like, oh, you sure you think you thought you saw a vampire, huh? Like, making fun of him, and he's sitting there like middle of the night, like all of these pictures on the walls and lines and just going crazy because he's like, why does no one believe me?
And then like whenever other people see it, they don't go to the cops, they go to him specifically, and eventually the weird old man who just moved into town will be like revealed to be a vampire hunter.
Oh, fuck, great. That would be a good movie.
Hire us, Hollywood.
Literally.
Soon, the epidemic of vampire fever evaporated just as quickly as its supposed namesake. The local sheriff's department was likely happy to no longer chase white-faced freakos through the dark streets, and the more superstitious residents breathed a sigh of relief as they took down their crucifixes. However, the specter of the vampire did not fully fade from the small town. After all, the undead do not rest. They wait. Over 20 years later, in the March of 2004, much like our first experience, begins with the police being summoned. Yet, instead of Graceland Cemetery, they are called to an apartment complex where several tenants report a strange figure crouching in a tree, simply watching people go in and out of the building. Police arrived and found a figure matching Pepper's original description. Pale face, tall, and of course, he still has the cape.
Oh, jeez.
I love it. He has the vampire drip.
And this is 20 years later.
Over 20 years.
Jesus.
I just love that he's just in a tree. Like a trapped cat.
That is pretty funny. I'm assuming they sent more cops this time around.
Yeah, it's more than one.
That's good.
It's plural officers. They don't give a number, but more than one.
Okay. Well, that helps though, in my opinion. Like give more like credence to like what they're witnessing.
All I can imagine though is like Bela Lugosi on top of a tree branch,
No.
being like, I can't get down.
Oh no.
Somebody get a ladder. I don't know why my Dracula sounds like Mario.
No. Mario. Uh,
Mushroom Kingdom, here I come.
we need Jack Black on the podcast now. That's all I think about when I think of
That's
Mario.
a dream.
I just hear the Princess Peach song.
Do you think he would write a song for us?
If we ask nicely.
Ooh, and I can ask very nicely. That sounded sexual. It's not.
That is actually where my brain went. I was like, oh, okay, Harmon.
The officers asked the figure to come down, and in response, the figure jumped onto the ground and bolted away. Of course, they attempted to pursue the creature, but simply could not keep up. The chase ended as the supposed stragoi came upon a 10-foot wall and in a single bound leapt over it, just like the cemetery fence. And
Okay, yeah,
just as
but there's a huge difference between a 4-foot fence at a cemetery and a 10-foot thing that he jumped over. That's insane.
yeah, and just like with a fence, there was no footprints on the other side. Again, seeming like the figure had simply just disappeared.
What the fuck? Now, this one's weird. I will say this is a weird one.
Oh, it's gonna get weirder.
As I didn't even think that was possible. Huh. Why am I
Oh,
doubting us? It's like we do this every time. It's like, damn, didn't think it could get any worse. And then you pull out something worse.
hey, it can't be any worse than the rabbit hole that was the Kentucky Goblins.
I will always love the Kentucky Goblins, but it was just like, things can't get any worse. Oh no.
We think we got to the bottom of the rabbit hole and then it would fall through into like the rabbit hole subcellar. It just gets deeper and deeper.
Just keep going.
I borrowed that analogy from This Paranormal Life, so no one call me out on Twitter. But one little fun fact I want to add is that this sighting took place only a year after Wisconsin formally outlawed vampirism.
Oh, okay, hold on a second. That
No, I am not kidding.
they outlawed vampirism?
Yes. Senator James R. Brumgart drafted a law to make the consumption of a child's blood a Class C felony punishable by a $10,000 fine and 15 years in prison, and
Oh,
presumably a stake for the heart.
oh my God.
There's actually a reason for this I'm going to get to in a moment.
Oh no.
But first, I want to give a bit of a trigger warning for this next section because it has potentially upsetting content and brief descriptions of sexual violence, not sexual assault, but close.
Oh
This
boy.
this legislation was sparked by the crimes of one Philip K. Buck, who was arrested in the 90s for hosting parties with underage girls who he would encourage to cut themselves, or sometimes cut them himself, and then drink blood directly from their wounds.
Oh my God.
Yeah. According to a local newspaper, the Shebangang Press, some of those girls were even tied to beds and whipped, but it was never said if this act was consensual or not. Either way, doing that to minors is bad, very bad.
Especially like young girls like that doing that kind of stuff, all you're doing is like you're like training them to accept it and taking
Yeah.
advantage of them. Like that's just
Children can't consent. I just want to put that out right now before anyone tries to cancel me. I'm hard line in the sand.
yes. Hard line.
Pedophilia is wrong.
Very wrong. Very, 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 very wrong. And
Hot take, people.
but it just shocks me that like him doing that, they were like, you know what? We're sick and fucking tired of all these stupid vampire things. This is it. We're done. If somebody else does this, rot in jail. Like, damn. Go Wisconsin. They were like, nope, we're done.
Well, it's because he technically got a lighter sentence than he was supposed to.
You're fucking kidding me.
Yeah. because that's not the end of his stuff.
Oh
I'm
God.
sending you a link with a picture of the dude because I just want you to see him.
Okay.
But in 2007, Philip K. Buck went on to be arrested for threatening to murder his own mother because she had her cats fixed.
So this guy is just wrong all across the board.
Oh yeah, that's because again, in 2016, he was arrested for a third time for stealing a woman's phone and threatening to murder her with a knife after having an argument in his house.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he was arrested and denied threatening her, taking the phone, or being drunk. A breathalyzer test quickly showed that at least one of those statements was a lie. I will admit this probably doesn't have any connection to the Mineral Point vampire, but I brought it up anyway because, one, I think it's kind of morbidly interesting, and two, if any of you are familiar with your Draculas, vampires tend to keep around a few crazy guys to do their dirty work. So maybe this guy is the Renfield to the Mineral Point vampire's Dracula or something.
That or the sighting of said vampire inspired him, like all these years later, to be like, huh, I'm gonna be an absolute fucking weirdo.
Yeah. Did you see the photo?
Yeah. Wow. He looks scary as fuck.
That's a Renfield right there. That is Renfield material.
Literally, God.
Are you familiar with Renfields?
Only because there's a movie coming out with Nicolas Cage called Renfield, and I've seen the trailer.
Depending on like the fiction or story, they can be called ghouls or thralls. They're living people who like do
Been
the dirty
given,
work for vampires.
like in this movie at least, it says that like the vampire gives them like a gift of some kind so that they can do their dirty work, basically.
Sometimes it's not even that. It's just, hey, if you do this for me and if you prove useful enough, maybe someday I will possibly make you a vampire.
Like maybe I won't drink your blood.
Yeah. The final sighting of the Midwest Nosferatu came on March 14th, 2008. Although some sources put the occurrence on July 11th, couple Brandon Hines and Jamie Marker were fishing on a pier on the bank of Loudon Lake. Night fishing, I assume, which is a real thing I concede. Sorry.
Yes.
But just as the youthful lovers walked along the pier, they could hear noises coming from directly under them. The news report reads as such. Quote, Hines began stomping on the boards, believing it was some kind of animal and hoping to scare it away. He aimed his flashlight between the cracks of the boards when he and Marker heard water splashing down towards the other side of the jetty. Hines shone his flashlight towards the sound to see a figure with dark hair and a very pale face pulling itself onto the jetty. Hines and Marker stood there in shock as the figure began to rise to his feet. Marker turned and ran up the path towards Hines' vehicle as Hines kept his flashlight aimed on the figure. Quote, it was wearing some kind of Dracula-looking cape and a suit, sort of, Hines stated. The cape is a weird constant in this case, and I love it.
It really is. And I am impressed by that. Usually, like, you know, if you spot like a cryptid, any of the other like cryptid sightings after the fact, usually there are some like similarities, but there's also some differences. Whereas with this, it's been almost the same every single time. Really big dude, white face, cape. Like, I find that very interesting.
And now we have like the full Dracula suit.
But I feel like he's been like upgrading. Like every time someone's seen him, he's like, you know, I don't think I look good enough.
It's the dripper drowned, and brother, I am floating. He's literally floating though.
Your is so good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It makes me laugh. I can't stop.
Mark claimed the same. Hines threw the flashlight towards the figure and ran up the path after Marker, who was
Oh.
already in the vehicle with the doors locked.
He was like, yeah, screw you, buddy. You're not getting in here.
The thing about love is that love is often not vampire proof.
Yeah. They get abandoned by your like significant other. They just abandon you. They're like, nope, vampires are not. I did not agree to this.
As Hines started the vehicle and began leaving, Marker saw out the passenger window that the figure was coming up the hill at a run, and she screamed for Hines to hurry. The couple drove to Mineral Point Police Department and made a statement directly afterwards. A patrol unit in the area of Loudon Lake investigated the area where Hines and Marker had been but found no one. Hines and Marker returned the next day to retrieve their belongings, with everything accounted for except for Hines's flashlight. Whoever it is, Hines says, they can keep it. End
Oh,
quote.
that's actually terrifying. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I'm picturing like me and Matthew like out one evening and we are hearing something and we go outside and we're looking and this thing crawls out and it starts chasing us. Yeah,
Yeah.
nah. I feel like my survival instincts aren't good in general. So I feel like I'd be trying to run and like fall on my face and it would just be terrible. Like that is so scary. And it's interesting because the other two sightings, he didn't chase them. He fled. So is that the
Yeah.
difference between cops who I guess this thing assumes are armed and just your average person?
I don't know. Maybe it's like, would vampires be afraid of guns?
I don't know. I don't know because we don't
Maybe.
actually know what vampires are, question
Yeah.
mark.
We'll get to that. I do some deep dive into vampire lore. Now, me personally, the really creepy image is imagining this thing not in the water, but actually crawling along the underside of the pier. That's what really freaks me out.
Well, and the fact that it was like underneath the pier and they could kind of see it like
Yeah.
through the slats in the wood, like
Yeah.
that's a horror movie in the making, you know, something underneath the pier that's all like slimy and weird and it reaches up, grabs your leg and pulls you into the water with it like, oh, no
Yeah.
thank you.
Um, there actually is precedent for vampires having the ability to scale surfaces no human could. To quote Bram Stoker's Dracula, quote, But my feet but my very feelings changed to repulsion and terror when I saw the whole man slowly emerge from the window and began to crawl down the castle wall over the dreadful abyss, face down with his cloak spreading out around him like great wings. End quote. By the way, Dracula is one of my favorite novels. I've read like 3 different times.
Oh, did you really? I don't think I've ever read Bram Stoker's Dracula.
It's really good.
I'll have to look
It's
into it, definitely.
it's like a this is going to be a weird comparison. It's like a Victorian version of found footage because it's a lot of people's personal writings.
So like accounts of what they saw.
Yeah, compilate. So it's like one character's journal, then letters, then another character's journal.
That's cool. That's really
Yeah,
cool. I did not know it was written like that.
yeah, I really like it. But so ends the last known encounter with the Mineral Point vampire. But though it seems the creature has returned to its grave, for now, the mystery of its sudden appearance is anything but laid to rest. A question that naturally comes to mind is, where did this presumably Transylvanian transient come from? He dresses like Dracula, acts like Dracula, but one would not expect to come across the lore of the night in, of all places, Wisconsin. For that answer, I think it would be useful to take a look at Mineral Point itself.
Is Mineral Point going to be like Point Pleasant, where it has some kind of funky thing happening, and that's why it like brought the cryptid to life?
Maybe.
Oh,
Like most animals, vampires tend to have a lair, typically one just as old and decrepit as them. Of course, the Count has his castle, the Lost Boys had their abandoned hotel, and Edward Cullen had a condo in the woods. Vampires appear to be naturally drawn to the ancient and the antique, perhaps out of a sense of familiarity to when they're alive. I subsequently went looking into historical buildings in Mineral Point. Being settled in 1827, it actually had quite a few. However, one in particular caught my eye, the Walker House. It was built in 1836 by William Walker and served as a local meeting house. Strangely, though, it was also the site of a hanging in 1842. The condemned was one William Caffey, who shot and killed a man named Samuel Southwick. The killing was spurred on by an argument after the young Caffey was skipped over for dancing. Now, this sounds silly, but remember, this is a frontier mining town, and dancing was a very rare opportunity for female interaction. He agreed to talk about it outside. However, a mob of people followed him and advanced upon him with sticks. Panicking, he pulled his gun and shot Southwick, as he was the most explicitly hostile in the group. Caffey was in charge of premeditated murder and hanged on makeshift gallows at the Walker House.
Jesus, makeshift
Yeah.
gallows. I'm assuming they just like strung up something and were like, yep, this will do. This should kill him.
It's probably a tree, a rope, and a barrel in all reality.
That sounds accurate too. So they had a fight about dancing for their daughters, and they started an argument that got out of control, created a mob, and in self-defense, he shot someone and then they hung him.
Yeah.
That whole situation's pretty fucked. I will not lie. Jesus.
Yeah. The process was especially morbid, even for an execution, due to Caffey's actions. I'm going to quote the Wikipedia article. Quote, the hanging was a strange affair, with a condemned man being brought to the inn astride his coffin, being out the tune of a funeral march with empty beer bottles, end quote. It is also worth noting that the people of Mineral Point had picnics as they watched him hang.
Oh my God.
Which isn't unusual for the time, but that's still kind of messed up.
It's not unusual. Like I knew, everybody loved like the Roman gladiators and seeing them just rip each other to shreds and like animals getting involved and killing people. Like I know humans as a whole have always had some weird, bizarre fascination with those kinds of events. But damn, a hanging for a man who, in my opinion, shouldn't have been hung. And you're having a picnic while his like family is probably sitting there watching him get hung. Like, how can you, Jesus?
Yeah. And like, you have to remember, this is like 30 years before 20 years before the Civil War. And the first Battle of Bull Run was a devastating loss for the Union because a lot of their forces couldn't evacuate because it was blocked by picnickers who came to watch the battle.
I knew about that, actually. Bull Run. I've heard of that because people sat like up on the hill watching down, like just watching again. And with that war, it's like brother against brother. They're just watching them just like massacre each other. Like, how is that enjoying?
I have no idea.
Good God.
Now, how could these two be connected? Is it possible that William Caffey found a way to not only cheat death, but exact revenge on the community that condemned him? Before we can rule anything out, I think it is important that we dive into the mythology of the vampire. Now, when most people think of vampires, their minds immediately call to certain rules. Garlics and crosses repel them. Sunlight kills them. They need an invitation to come in, as well as other things. One should keep in mind, though, that most of these assumptions are rooted not in actual folklore, but rather the universal Dracula movies or the original Bram Stoker novel. Both of these sources took great liberties with authentic vampire legends, though. Thus, it would serve us well to dig up historical, true, quote-unquote, superstitions about the bloodsuckers. Call me Von Helsing, because it's time for a lesson in vampire lore. Now, every
Woo!
continent, yeah, has stories of something akin to our idea of a Nosferatu, be it the Greek Vicarlacus, the African Obeifo, or the Chinese Jingshai. The world is positively batty with stories of the restless, relentless undead. Still there?
I am still here, and I liked that. Restless, relentless, undead. That was pretty good.
And positively batty.
Yes, I did like that too.
Nevertheless, I wish to focus on the nation of Romania and their interpretation that has greatly informed our modern vampire, the Strigoi. Are you familiar?
No, I feel like I've heard the word before, but I don't know why.
If you've seen The Strain, you might have heard it there.
Ah, the strain.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that sounds kind of correct. Yes.
The word itself, Strigoi, is actually connected to striga, meaning to scream. According to Dantonelli Paparelli, Rome la inmor, inmor, inmormanatelli.
Good job.
God, I'm so sorry, listeners. A book on the supernatural written by Dmitry Cantemir and Todor Baruda in 1882. There's actually a few ways to become a Strigoi. They could live a life of sin, die unmarried, die of execution for perjury, trigger warning, die by suicide, or die from a curse. Another
Eh,
way would be if before the funeral, an animal such as a cat or dog jumped over the corpse.
that's oddly specific, but some of this honestly reminds me kind of how people can turn into wendigos,
Yeah.
like the life of sin, that kind of stuff. Like that felt like that played in with the Wendigo legend as well. So that's just interesting.
How does it feel knowing that, not to get too morbid, but with the amount of pets that you have, if you die in your apartment, you're probably becoming a Strigoi.
Yeah, because one of them most certainly would jump over my dead body. They'd be like, oh, excuse me, mom. And they keep going.
Wow, you're sleepy today.
Yeah, literally, they'd want me to become a Stragoi just so I could get back up and feed them.
From this, we can already find two possible reasons for Kaffy to return as a Strigoi. More if you excuse the perjury part, because he was executed, or if an animal just happened to jump over his corpse before he's buried.
Well, and I'm sure too, like with this legend, like someone wrongly executed who comes back from like the dead to like exact revenge. I feel like that would also kind of like go into what can make a Strigoi.
Yeah. The Strigoi is like kind of a catch-all term. There's a lot of vampire Slavic lore.
Oh, I'm sure, for sure. Yeah.
While I was doing some research, I did find an article titled Count Dracula and the Folkloric Vampire 13 Comparisons by
Hmm.
Patrick Johnson from the Journal of Dracula Studies, Volume
Ooh.
3, Article 6, published in 2001. It reads, quote, in actual historical reports, we find that plagues of disease are sometimes blamed on vampires, end quote. I followed this up by looking up outbreaks in Wisconsin, and I found a possibly very interesting correlation.
Hmm.
Officer Pepper's first sighting was in 1981, right?
Yes.
Well, in 1982, 16 cases of Kawasaki syndrome were found in Milwaukee and adjoining counties. For
I've,
the unaware,
yeah, I was about to say, I've never heard of that in my life.
Kawasaki syndrome is a very rare disease that causes inflammation and swelling in blood vessels, typically affecting children under the age of 5.
Oh, wow.
I mentioned it's relatively rare, only affecting about 9 to 20 children under the age of 5 per 100,000 people, and they had 16 cases.
That's
What
insane. Is it
what
contagious? Or
we don't know.
so there's like nothing known about it really because it's so rare.
Not a lot. Well, kind of. Let me continue.
Okay.
What makes What makes this outbreak even stranger is, to quote mayoclinic.org, quote, no one knows what causes Kawasaki disease, but scientists don't believe the disease to be contagious from person to person. Some think that Kawasaki disease happens after a bacterial or viral infection, or that is linked to other environmental factors, end quote. So it's not like the state just had a super spreader. The current
That's
theory would have,
crazy.
yeah, it would have to be an environmental condition. Say, for example, a walking manifestation of plague and corruption.
At that point, you
Corruption?
might as be at that point you might as well be talking about one of the omens of what are they? The guys who read the
Four
horses.
horsemen?
Thank you. God, the death dudes. That's what that reminded me of.
One of the dudes,
The dudes
one
on
of
the
the men
horse.
on the horses?
Yeah, that come
I
in
know
and
there's
kill
more than
you.
3 of them, but less than 5.
Yeah, there's more of them. Four horsemen. Thank you. Yes.
What were they? The Gloomy Quartet or something? Quartet?
That's pretty good. I like that. That's
It
how we
gets
have to like
stranger.
refer to them from now on. The gloomy quartet.
I'm down.
Okay.
It gets stranger though. The encounter with the creature on the pier, our final encounter, was in 2008. In 2009, Wisconsin, specifically Marathon County, which I believe is only 2 counties over from Mineral Point, had an outbreak of blastomycesis, and a rare life-threatening fungal infection.
Oh
And when
God.
I say rare, I mean rare.
Well, yeah, there's well, haven't you seen The Last of Us? They've known barely anything about funguses and just in general. So it's kind of like that's freaking crazy.
The yearly infection rate is 1 to 2 cases per 100,000 people. And Wisconsin had the largest breakout in recorded history with a whopping 55 cases.
And this is a year after the last vampire sighting.
Yes.
Shoo!
Outbreaks of the disease still happen in the state today, with Wisconsin's rate of blastomycesis being a terrifying 10 to 40 cases per 100,000 people, so significantly higher than the national average.
And has this been happening since 2009? Like 2009 was like the beginning of it, and it's been like that ever since.
It would seem so.
That is crazy. Okay, can we talk about how this cryptid being like the harbinger of death or whatever is the equivalent of Mothman showing up and then the disaster of the bridge happening the day after? And they're saying that he was like the bad omen or he was there as a warning. Like, that's just so weird how all of these cryptids we talk about, they all kind of line up in like little places.
Well, the thing is, with old vampire lore, it's not that they're an omen of coming plague, it's that they bring the plague.
They themselves are the harbinger.
Yeah, they are living corruption. So just having one in the area makes cattle die, makes disease break out.
Are we 100% positive this isn't one of the horsemen? Like, literally, this sounds like plague. A supernatural episode of Plague walking through, and all of these people on the sidewalk just like dropping like flies. Like, that's what I'm picturing right now.
Well, I doubt it's that, because if we know anything about the Gloomy Quartet, it's that they're horse girls. And so far, this guy's been on foot.
This is true. This is true.
Now, while we're on the topic of vampire mythology, I thought I would give some more fun Strigoi folklore for us to sink our teeth into,
Oh, ironic.
namely the ways to kill a vampire. If one of the toothy pricks come at you, there are a few methods of defending yourself. A stake for the heart is surprisingly supported by historical texts. Folklorist Mrgoici states, quote, the commonest method in Romania is to drive a stake for the heart or navel. And Valisi is sufficient to drive a needle through the heart. Garlic may be placed in the mouth, end quote. Yes, garlic works too, but not as a deterrent, but as a way to make sure they stay dead. As one of the ways of killing a vampire was to exhume their corpse and put garlic in the mouth as part of the process of finally killing them.
That's interesting. Putting it in their mouth. I wonder like why that was the choice. Or similar to like how you said it's not just the heart, but also the navel, like your belly button. If you stab them in the belly button, that was supposed to work too.
Well, the thing with stakes is that the idea was it would stake them to the ground so they can't get up.
Oh, so it's not necessarily that's what kills them. It's just keeping them down.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I believe it's because garlic in folklore is traditionally seen as a home remedy. So the idea is you kill the manifestation of disease by putting a healing herb in its mouth.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So that's like when they put, stuff in their pockets so that you couldn't smell the smell of death,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. I get
Pocket
it.
full of posy.
Yep.
Now, if garlic's not your favorite, there is actually another herb to help fell vampires.
Oh boy, tell me.
One researcher quoted by the article I mentioned said, quote, "The solution is to exhume him and pierce his body with a needle or nail. Another solution is to walk around the grave with burning hemp. The hemp smoke renders the strigoi harmless." End quote.
Hemp, you're kidding me.
Smoke weed over vampire graves.
They will become so chill from it that they won't eat you.
Yo, bro, you just need to like relax, man. You literally got all
Here,
eternity.
take a hit of my dab pen. Like you'll be
Zoinks!
golden. Oh, that's so funny. Oh my God.
I'm just imagining Dracula like doing a fat bong rip.
Well, today's 420, so
Oh my god, you're right.
this is the perfect day to do this, Armin. Oh my
I
God.
never realized.
Happy birthday to weed. It helps keep you alive from vampires.
Dude, I got so nervous when you said happy birthday.
Why?
420 is Hitler's birthday, dude.
It is. I didn't know that.
Now, apparently, contrary to popular belief, Strigoi can enter holy ground. Dracula in the folkloric vampire shares his account of just such a thing. Quote, "The Romanian linguist Emil Petrovici records this folktale. Once the Strigoi turned to a handsome young man, and a young girl fell in love with him. They were married, but the girl also wanted a religious wedding. He rejected this idea. Her parents insisted, so he agreed to go to the church. But when they emerged from the church, he looked at his wife in a strange way, baring his teeth. She became afraid and told her mother about it. Her mother said, 'Don't be afraid, he loves you.' So that's why he bared his teeth. Weird. When their parents came to visit them, they couldn't find them. They had locked themselves in, but the people could see them through the window. He was sucking her blood. When the people saw it, they shot him through the window." End
Oh,
quote.
oh my
So
God.
apparently guns do work on vampires, or at least Strigoi.
Okay.
Because later in the article, when they're listing ways to kill it, one of them was simply dig the body up and shoot it a bunch. So
Well, then, okay, so that kind of goes with my theory that the reason this specific vampire in Wisconsin did not chase police is because it knew they were armed.
he was afraid of getting arrested.
Apparently, he didn't want to go to
A
jail.
life sentence carries a lot more weight when you're immortal, dude.
It really does. Like you can't die in prison because you're never gonna die.
There's a lot more to the mythology of Strigoi, and maybe at some point we'll cover them on their own little episode.
Mhm.
But I just want to present a few selected accounts to show that our modern idea of a vampire is far from the traditional one.
But it's interesting that even like with the traditional, we still keep some of it. It's just
Yeah.
changed over the years. But like the garlic thing, like it's just so interesting that they were putting it in the mouth because garlic was good for like disease. And now
Yeah.
they're like, you say vampires don't like the smell of garlic. So it's just very interesting. I like it.
Thank you. Yeah. In turn, I think that will help us approach the mineral point case with an open mind, in case some of the things don't line up with our preconceived notions of what a vampire should act like. However, that brings us to one of the big criticisms of the case that skeptics will bring up. It's so stereotypically vampire. The suit, the white face, the fucking cape. It could only be more Dracula-esque if he spoke in a Lugosi voice and had a harem of blood-sucking harlots.
Or had a
And
freaking coffin dragging behind him. That's his bed he climbs in at night. Like
He was in a cemetery.
Yeah, like, exactly.
And this makes it more likely, in my opinion, to be a hoax because it's just so movie like.
It
Now,
is.
I believe
It's too media. It's too mainstream.
I like my vampires underground. Uh, that's
Oh.
so dumb. Now, I believe the sightings truly happened. That much is evident from the news and police reports. The question is if the figure seen is a person pulling a prank or something truly supernatural.
It's just weird to me that in both cases of police showing up and like chasing this guy, he like the footsteps vanish. Like that's the one weird thing that like you can't just explain that away. Like maybe in
Well,
the first guy's like the first like Officer Pepper, it could have snowed that night and the next morning when he went back out there, only some of the tracks were still able to be seen. That could explain that. But in regards to the second group of cops, that was multiple people and the like footsteps are gone, he's gone. Like that's kind of weird. That's a weird one.
well, the first sign is not overtly paranormal. Jumping over a 4-foot fence would be difficult, especially for someone in a cave, but it's not impossible.
Right.
The second encounter in 2004, however, is better to explain. This figure managed to escape the police by jumping over a 10-foot wall in a single bound.
Yeah,
They have no,
exactly. That
they
doesn't
have no,
how do you do that?
we have no reason to assume their measurement of the wall's height or description of the figure's motions are inaccurate. So I looked up the highest jump by a human and found this. The record was set in 1993 by Cuban high jumper Javier Sudamar, with an impressive 8.03 foot jump. But that's still 2 feet short of our suspect's feet. And if the jump can't be achieved by world-class athletes, there's no reason to believe that a prankster in Mineral Point, Wisconsin would be able to do it so reliably.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I find it weird. If that's why when you said hoax, I'm like, like the footsteps being gone or like them not being able to find them and the jumping of that, especially that, the 10-foot wall, that's just outlandish. It's just weird. This is a
Yeah.
weird one.
The most explicitly supernatural sign was, of course, the last one. And it's the one that makes me hesitant to say this is a hoax. Now, I might be extrapolating a bit, but it sounds as if the creature was crawling underneath the pier, stalking its victims. Witnesses made no mention of the figure being wet, so it appears that it avoided the water entirely. I know there was the splash, but they didn't say it was soaked or anything. And if it was in the water, that brings us to the point that 1, the wet face paint would have washed off if it was makeup.
True.
2, who would be willing to wear a suit while wading through a lake?
Under a
And
pier to freak people out. Like that's you'd have to be really committed to your prank.
which brings us to point 3. How long would they have been waiting there?
Yeah, like how long were they there? Like waiting for the perfect people to come around? Like, I'm sorry. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Now, I suppose one could dismiss the encounter by claiming that the witnesses were lying, but I like to give people the benefit of the doubt.
I do too, because I don't think you would just go and make a police report that makes you look crazy for fun. Like,
Yeah.
talking to police in general is already kind of like an anxiety thing, because obviously
Yeah.
you don't want to be in trouble. So going there already to report something like this, and if you were lying, like, can't you get in trouble for lying like that about
Yeah, you
stuff?
could. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's perjury. And if you get executed for that, you become a vampire.
Oh my God. But there's just so much to it. That's why like I don't always want to doubt people who go to the police, because why would you be going unless something really happened to you?
Like, if you go straight to the media, that's one thing. You're trying to sell a story. But
Yes.
getting the police involved involved makes it a potential crime.
And the fact that they did it immediately after it happened, they didn't do it like the next day or a week later to report it. It was like not, they drove from the incident to the police station in a panic.
Yeah.
Like that's believable to me.
So if this was, if this was a genuine creature of the night, we still have some unanswered questions. Namely, even with my lore dump, Mineral Point seems like an unlikely place for a vampire to appear. Also, take into account its long absences. Over 20 years passed between the first and second incidences. Sergoi are known to move around, yet there's no reports of a similar creature in surrounding areas I found. On top of that, never does any of the expected activities one would expect from a vampire. There's no uptick in murders or disappearances as far as I can tell. No cases of anyone having their blood sucked except for the one creep I mentioned. Perhaps it took a more subtle approach.
Or
Maybe
maybe
did
that's why it
have a
was in
servant.
cemeteries. That's why it was in cemeteries. I didn't want fresh people.
Oof. Yeah. Or maybe Philip K. Buck or someone of his ilk really was a Renfield, like someone who was getting them like blood bags or telling them, hey, if you go after homeless people, no one's going to report them.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah, it's sad, but unfortunately very true. It's serial killers always go after the homeless and sex workers.
Yeah, anybody who could be considered like transient because they can get away with it.
Yeah. But a diet of the impoverished tends to work better in a city than a relatively rural settlement with a population under 3,000. There's also the fact that subtlety tends to go out the window when you are wearing a fucking cape.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, could there be any other paranormal prowess this creature aligns with? Surprisingly, yes. Longtime viewers will remember our crossover episode where we discussed Spring-Heeled Jack, the hurdle-hopping horror of London. And frankly, the two match up pretty well. Spring-Heeled Jack was described as having grayish pale skin, a cloak to cover his body, and his eponymous ability to jump tall distances.
Now that is so crazy that they both line up like that so well. I didn't even draw the connection initially, but you're right.
Yeah, I mean, Spring-Heeled Jack got his name because when people chased him through the streets, he would just jump onto the top of buildings.
Yeah, because spring heeled. It was like he had springs in his shoes or in his feet or whatever. Like that, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So on top of that, the Mineral Point vampire seems closer to Jack's modus operandi of causing general havoc than the predatory nature one would expect from a Dracula wannabe.
But it's still interesting that a year after at least the first sighting and the last sighting both resulted in a year later like a plague almost.
Yeah. Now I admit I have no evidence the two are connected. I just found it a weird coincidence.
It is a weird coincidence, especially with like, putting garlic in the vampire's mouth because it brought plagues or whatever. Like it's just there's a lot of coincidences here.
It's freaky. And that brings us to the final question that we strive to answer with every case. Enough with the backstories and the theories. It's time for us to stake a claim. Is the Mineral Point vampire real? Kenzie? What do you think?
I don't.
If JP was here, he would say it was a bear.
He would tell, and then I'd yell at him like, "Oh, have you ever seen a bear jump 10 feet, JP?" I think not. I'm trying to think because it's just weird. It's a weird thing, and it happened 3 times, and there are coincidences, and it lines up with a couple other cryptids as well, and it's just. I want to say no, it's like the vampire itself isn't real, but whatever they saw is definitely real. You just don't know what it is.
We never, our yes or no is never dependent on us having an exact idea what happened. The yes or no is more, do we think, regardless of what it was, that something paranormal, something anomalous happened? So I can't think of any rational explanation besides it being a hoax. So we have to decide, is this something real and supernatural, or was it a dude fucking around in a costume?
But like I said, it wouldn't, like, the person would have to be like so committed to being this like crazy prankster. Like, and the fact that like 20 years passed and he popped back up again, like, is it the same guy who's just fucking with people? Like, I don't know. It's just so weird that I kind of want it to be supernatural because I feel like it would make the most sense.
Assuming the third sighting really did happen, a person's not doing that. That's not a person.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to have to say, I don't necessarily believe it's a vampire, but I definitely believe it's something.
Something supernatural.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to say. That's going to be my answer.
And I'm going to agree. Of all the cryptids, I did not expect the mineral point vampire to get a
yes, I know, but it's just, there's just stuff about it. It's weird.
When you look at it, it on surface level, it's so easy to dismiss, but when you really think about it
and like talk about it and like all of the evidence and research that you put forth, it's believable. Again, and not necessarily that it's a vampire, not necessarily that, but something for sure.
Something supernatural. I don't think it was a person.
I don't think it was a person. There's just too much about it. And it makes me laugh that only the first, like the first sighting called it ugly. And the last two, they didn't mention the ugliness at all.
Yeah, and if it was just the first sighting, I would 100% say, oh, it's just a dude. But it's the 10-foot wall. No one's doing that.
It's the gaps, like the sighting, it only gets cited once. And then all these years later, it gets cited again. Like, that kind of thing isn't normal either.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it could be like someone inspired by the original sighting, but
we've seen that before, and it's usually easier to tell.
And it's, I keep coming back to it, the record for highest human jump is 8 feet.
Exactly. And a 10-foot wall that, again, I'm assuming they're not just like pulling that number out of their ass, especially if they're like reporting it in a case or whatever that they witnessed. Like, I sincerely doubt they're just like, oh my God, that wall was like 25 feet tall. Like, just making it up. Like, I feel like it's accurate.
Yeah. And this wasn't like a special high jump. The dude was running from the cops, which, if I remember correctly, when you're running from the cops, you go farther, but you stay lower. And he had to actually be over 10 feet because he didn't reach 10 feet. He went over 10 feet.
Exactly, which is insane. And that's like jumping just from the ground up to 10 feet. And like you said, the masterful feat of a human is 8 feet, which is still like insane. But 10 feet, you'd have to be like, you need a trampoline to do that.
Yeah. I can't see a person doing that. Not for a prank.
Sorry, I just hit my mic. But no, I agree. I can't see a person doing that either. That doesn't seem possible.
Well, I did not expect the mineral point vampire, something most of our listeners have probably never heard of. Expecting to get a yes. That's great.
I know. I feel like we both need like a nice little medal today. This is so exciting.
And our first vampire.
Which is kind of crazy. I still can't believe it's our first one. But it's just a weird thing. The whole thing, start to finish, was just weird.
Oh, there's weirder vampire cases, and I'm excited to get around to them at some point.
I'm excited now too.
The Highgate vampire is going to be fun.
Oh God, I honestly, I'm pretty excited. Vampires, I will say, I've always found vampires interesting.
So, any closing thoughts before I get into the outro?
I'm so happy to be back in the podcast. I have missed it so much. And this was a lot of fun, and you did great.
Thank you. It was good to have you again.
Thank you. This was a lot of
Hopefully
fun,
we can make
Harmon.
this more regular.
I would love to make it more regular. Pretty please. This was fun.
And hopefully JP and Jess can join us next time.
For sure. Even though JP's work hours are insane.
They have him in a pit, guys.
He
They
works
put him in a
12-hour
pit.
shifts. The poor man.
It's going to be me soon.
Oh, God.
But thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Cryptid Code.
Woo.
If you enjoyed this, consider subscribing to keep up to date on episodes. You can follow us on YouTube, although you will get episodes a little later. Sorry, that's just conversion. Takes a while. But we're also on Anchor, Spotify, Stitch, a bunch of other places, Apple, Google Podcasts, pretty much everywhere good pods are made.
Woo.
You can also follow us on Twitter at the Cryptid Code. You can email us questions, case suggestions, or your own personal encounters at our email, thecryptidcode@hotmail.com. Yes, I have a Hotmail because I am an old man.
We're not going to, no judgment on the Hotmail. None at all.
And we still have a TikTok. They haven't banned it yet.
Woo.
I rarely upload.
Just give it to me.
I will. If you want it, you can have it, bro. I don't know what tickety talk people like. I just been putting clips on there. I only put 2.
Oh, I love it though.
Life is hard. Join us again in 2 weeks when we bring you another story of creepy encounters with the creatures somewhere between science and superstition.
Ooh.
Until then, remember, was a man a miserable pile of secrets? That goth girl who suddenly likes you just wants you for your blood. And most of all, stay spooky out there. Good night.